Welcome to Writing the West podcast. Our guest this week is author Chris Enss, whose new book explores the remarkable lives of May Lillie and Pawnee Bill, the Wild West's enduring power couple. Chris, you've written more than 50 books on the Old West and all different sorts of topics. What drew you in particular to the lives of May and Gordon Lillie?
Years ago, I did a book called The Many Loves of Buffalo Bill. And while I was writing that book, I happened onto some information about May Lillie, who was vehemently opposed to her husband, Gordon, going into business with Cody because she thought that he was a bad businessman and a womanizer. And so that kind of piqued my interest about May. I thought, wow, this is somebody that I got to know more about. So when I dug into her life and started working on a story about her, I found out what an incredible talent she was.
Well, and I thought it was so interesting because so many books about the West and what we know as the Old West have to do and center around this idea of the individual and individualism. But this book is about a power couple, in that time period. What about their relationship made it so compelling for your research?
I think it's just terribly romantic how they first meet. She goes to see one of the Wild West shows that he's in, and he finds her. When he sees her, he thinks that she is very pretty, and she thinks that he is strange looking. I mean, she was from Philadelphia. She'd never seen never seen a man with long hair wearing buckskin from head to toe. And so it was right off, it wasn't a pairing that you would automatically say this goes together. But there was something about that they liked in one another, and it was a relationship that lasted 50 years. And I was drawn to that particular part of the story because so many relationships in the entertainment industry, whether it was in the American frontier or today, don't last very long, but theirs indeed did.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting as well. In the introduction to your book, you open with a great line from Shakespeare. And as a former English teacher and English major, I couldn't help but enjoy that. And it says, I would not wish any companion in the world but you. And, why set the stage for this story with a line so powerful and enduring as Shakespeare?
Because they were indeed um, two individuals that never tired of one another and were less of who they really were without the other person with them. They really enhanced one another's personality. They brought out the best of one another. They had a great deal in common. She credits him with so much, and he credits her with being able to be the individual that he turns out to be.
I'd love to jump into to May here to start off, just because I find her so interesting. She's, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, a Quaker girl from Philly who became, pretty much one of the world's greatest sharpshooters in her own time. And how do you think that she reconciled, her upbringing, which was so Eastern and so opposed to the lawlessness that she would find in the West.
Well, I think that she had very progressive parents. With Quaker parents were quite quick to be able to say that the young women need to be as educated and as worldly as the young men. And her father, May's father, was a physician, but he was an interesting kind of physician because he was what was known as, in layman's term, an electric physician, in that he would bring his patients in and then shock them into feeling better. And so right off, she's involved. I mean, her family is involved in something that was kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily questionable, but certainly he wasn't in the mainstream of practicing medicine. So there was already that touch of rebel that she had in her baked into her family. And and certainly when a relationship starts with Gordon, it's not something that her mother really welcomes. Indeed, the letters that Gordon writes May, her mother had taken and wouldn't let her see them, and some of them she even burned. She didn't really want that relationship to happen. And it's because we're a very close-knit family in Philadelphia. You want everybody to stay close. The fact that May is going to be married to someone that would take her out of the family structure of being everybody together on Sunday afternoons and I mean, that really didn't set well with them. So it wasn't necessarily Gordon as much as it was, where are you going with our kid? We
Yeah.
want her to be here.
Did you find anything in your research in terms of, May's dreams and goals for herself that helped us to understand why she was so interested in Gordon and the life that he was living?
I think she just always yearned to be doing something different, something inventive, something that was not the norm. She was just one of those kind of individuals, and that was Bill as well, or Gordon as well. I mean, I keep calling him going back and forth between Gordon and Bill. I mean, his name was Gordon Lillie, but everybody called him Pawnee
Pawnee
Bill.
Bill, right.
Right. But I think she recognized that element of Bill that was something that she wanted too. But I will tell you, I think that she was not completely aware of how out of her element she was going to be. Because certainly when they do get married and they go to Kansas where his home is, she is completely taken aback and wonders when the train drops them off. Okay, well, where's the mode of transportation to get us to the next step? And you know, she's out in the wilderness. And that was just not something. She learns to love that part of it. But I think it was a learning curve for her.
Right. And, you mentioned that at the end, well, not at the end of, but at one point in her career, she's billed as a world champion lady rider and rifle shot. But I'm sure there was a lot of work and life experiences that happened before she got to that point. Can you talk to us for a second about what her learning curve was and was it a trial by fire? How did she become this champion sharpshooter and rider?
It was fused out of deep sadness. She and Gordon are shortly after they get married. I mean, they're married in 1886. They have their first child in 1887. And he's a big boy. He's over 10 pounds when he's born. And May is not quite 5 feet. And so that experience changed her physically. And then when their son dies at 6 weeks old, that is another change, not only for Gordon, but specifically for May, because she's completely despondent and questioning what she's going to do with her life, where she's going to go, how she's going to get beyond this grief. And it's only when she looks out at the paddock and sees Gordon working with the horses and that she decides this is something that maybe I could do, and I need to get up from here, and I need to go out and be with my husband, and I need to learn something new. And that's what she does. She learns everything that she can from Gordon about writing, about shooting, about buffalo. I mean, she learns about the West from her husband, and that pulls her out of her grief and fuses her into the character that she eventually has.
Now, and I think at this point in our history, in 2025, there's starting to be more research about, women like May Lillie who really stood out amongst the crowd in their own time period. But, I'm sure in her time in the late 1880s, this was not common. Can you talk to that at all and how maybe May Lillie helped to redefine women's roles and not only in the Old West, but in shows like this as well?
Well, I have to go back to Cody for a moment because Cody was very progressive when it came to hiring women. And he recognized how important women were in the Wild West shows because they were an attraction. They were an anomaly. People were fascinated with the fact that women could ride and rope and shoot as well as they did. And you know, Gordon was anything, if he was nothing, he was a phenomenal businessman. And he recognized in May her talent, one, and secondly, how business would only increase by her being a part of the shows. So indeed, she is a big part of the Pawnee Bill Wild West show, and people come from everywhere to see her amazing talent. And she, like Annie Oakley, who was also a part of Pawnee Bill's show, which one of the things I admired about May was that she wasn't quick to want to take center stage. She recognized when Annie was a part of what they were doing, and the Pawnee Bill Wild West show was indeed a business. She recognized Annie Oakley's draw and how people wanted to come and see someone as famous as Annie be a part of this. And so she was not somebody that said, oh, it's either Annie Oakley or me. She didn't do that. She knew that she had an audience as well and that people wanted to see her skill. And she knew that there was room for both of them. And I really appreciated that about May. She wasn't a glory hog. She learned her business sense from her husband.
Can you talk for a second as well about, the idea of, I can only imagine in that time period how difficult it would have been to travel from place to place, putting on these shows, and there was no OSHA or anything like that in that time period. Can you talk just for a second? Was there an on and off season for the show? What was the locations that they would travel to pretty regularly? Can you talk for a second about that?
Certainly, they generally house their big show, which included numerous buffalo, included lots of horses, camels. I mean, they had animals galore, and they would store their show during the off season, which was generally in the spring. I mean, they had a time period there. I mean, they worked from summer up until the beginning of the year. Then they would have that time off, and they would store everything, the livestock, all of the feed, all of the backdrops, everything, either in Philadelphia or Jersey some of the time. And then they would pull everything together. They'd work on who was going to be in their show. And then they would go back and they would pull all of this material out and put it on a train. I mean, it was not a small feat. It was a monumental effort and very, very expensive.
Yeah, and
So
go ahead, please.
I was amazed at just the vastness of the show and how you had to store it someplace. I don't know why I thought prior to working on this book that this was just a year-round thing. You had the animals with you all the time. You had all the actors with you all the time. But it certainly you had a season that you weren't doing anything, and those items had to be stored somewhere.
Yeah, and it always impresses me reading these stories with the lack of, communication like we have today, and can you talk for a second? I have a few more questions about May before we really get to Gordon. Um, you know, in that time period, what made a good businessman or in May's case, a good businesswoman in terms of, you know, I can only imagine having to deal with all of these different, cities, all the different actors and performers, the animals handlers. What did they really look at that made successful business people in that time period?
Well, their show was primarily based in the East Coast. There was no reason to take the show west of the Mississippi for the most part because people west of the Mississippi were familiar with the way the West was. They knew cowboys. They knew buffalo. They knew all of this. So being able to find, I mean, you were a good business person if you were able to locate those particular places in east of the Mississippi that were excited to see you and that you knew would come back time after time to these shows. I mean, certainly a lot of times they open their shows in Philadelphia, and the reason why is because May's family was really very vast. I mean, she had lots of relatives. So you can be assured not only would you get a great audience from her family, but also her friends. And 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 it wasn't just that. I mean, Gordon was really quite accomplished in and of himself, and so people would come to see him as well. But being able to find those particular show locations where you knew you were going to get a big audience.
Yeah.
You know, if you went to New Orleans and nobody really cared about the show, you wouldn't go back to New Orleans again. You
Right.
you would keep going back, and then every year you'd increase the number of acts you had and expand on that. So when you came back to that same location, it wasn't the same show. You had built on that show and were bringing more acts to it, and people wanted to see it, and it was familiar, and it was routine for them. It was the audience looked forward to them coming back again and again.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up you brought up earlier obviously the connection with Buffalo Bill Cody and his show. And I think, in popular memory, I think Buffalo Bill tends to overshadow him a little bit in that consciousness. And what about the show that, Gordon and May were putting on really made theirs distinct from Buffalo Bill's?
Well, I want to mention that the fact that when the Lily's show was very successful, it was due in part because was in Europe, and Cody was touring Europe for such a long time. So there was a vacuum. There was this need in the States for this show. And so that's when the Lilies rise up, because Cody's out of the country. And so that big competition isn't there. So that's a part of it. The other element is that Gordon was very close with members of the Pawnee Nation and was able to recruit some of the greatest Pawnee entertainers that there were. I mean, he was very close to them and was able to bring them in. So they weren't just sitting on a horse doing nothing. And by that, I'm not trying to be offensive to Geronimo, who was a part of Cody's show, but they interacted.
Right.
And Cody, I mean, sorry, Gordon also, he prided himself on his cast being international. They were incredibly diverse.
Right.
You had you had tumblers or gymnasts from the East, from the Far East, as a part of their show, and you also had vaqueros who were part of the show. I mean, he was like I said. I mean, you talk about, it was just one of the most diverse casts I've ever seen in my life, and I think that was attractive because people in the East could see other individuals from various parts of the world that they never would have been introduced to before, and that made it attractive. It was educational. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a true full-on education.
Well, and it seems to me that, a really important facet of Gordon's personality was that ability to connect with other people, to build those relationships. Because without that, I don't think there would be, a Pawnee Bill in his show. But can you talk for just a second about Gordon's upbringing and background, and to help us understand maybe what went into making what would become Pawnee Bill so successful?
Well, he's born in Bloomington, Illinois, and not too far from the Kickapoo Reservation. And growing up, he loved dime novels, and he loved reading about Buffalo Bill Cody. He was fascinated with Cody. And he was not, this is one of the things I thought was fascinating about Gordon. He was not a particularly healthy man. He had some physical struggles. And so, he was painfully thin. At one time, he does become good friends with the Pawnee when they move. His father ran a flour mill in Illinois, and so they move everything from Illinois at one time to Wellington. Um, and here they are in Kansas, and Cody doesn't, I mean, Gordon doesn't know anybody. And so he wants to go west. He wants to not work in the flower business. He doesn't want to be around, he doesn't want to be a teacher, which he ultimately becomes, but he doesn't necessarily want to do that. He wants to break free and do what Cody does. And he becomes friends with the Pawnee and learns their language. And they help him along the line of getting a little bit more healthy by this bizarre concoction of, if I'm not mistaken, it's either elk blood or some kind of animal blood that they have him to drink, which really is quite restorative for him. And and then that's when he just says, "All right, I'm feeling much better. I don't have to be a teacher and stay home and take care of my family. There's things that I can do, and I'm going to go and do it, and I'm going to go west. I'm going to be Cody." So that's what he does. But unlike Cody, he did have a way about him where he was able to he just had a softness about him, a countenance about him, where he could speak to anybody and make them feel comfortable. And he was not without his own silliness when it came to promoting the shows in a variety of ways, which May was always saying, "All right, that's you've gone too far."
The
But
Showman.
yeah, you got to. I appreciate what you're doing, but really, I mean, one of the stories I write about, and if I'm getting ahead of you, please forgive me. One of the stories I write about in the book is when they go to Belgium to do their show in Europe, and he's convinced that going up in a hot air balloon is really going to promote the show. Now, he's just supposed to be in the balloon. It's tethered to the ground. He's supposed to be up in the balloon with the gentleman who doesn't speak any English, and of course, he doesn't speak the native language of Belgium either. And so, but they're just supposed to go up in this balloon and come back down. But the balloon becomes untethered from the bottom, from the ground, and so they are flying around for quite a little while before they come down. But still, to Gordon's credit, he's able to communicate by drawing pictures. They draw pictures back and forth. But I mean, that's what made him such a good business person. It made him such a phenomenal character in the West. He was able to be an everyman in situations. And I mean, I just think he was, and that too. And I think he was a teacher, which I think now, when I'm talking about this, his drive to educate, I think, was one of the principal reasons why the show was as diverse as it was.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned or noted in your book as well, how the extents to which the Lillies went to ensure fair treatment among the different peoples. I mean, you talked about, obviously, indigenous, you had Mexican vaqueros, all of these people from different cultures and different countries, and I can only imagine, through the different languages, through the different customs, how involved and complicated that would have been, especially for that time period. Can you talk to that for a moment?
And you know, at that particular time when they had such a diverse cast, had learned a lot from Gordon, and so the two of them were very well versed at being able to communicate with every one of their cast members. And so whatever concern that they had, they rallied to meet whatever concern that they had and be able to help them. And they were very well respected for that. There were many Pawnee children that were born during the shows, and that they were part of the cast, and those children were either named Gordon, Bill, or May.
Wow.
I mean, that's how well revered they were among their cast members, because they did make sure that they were treated well. They did make sure that they always that their customs were adhered to, that they didn't say to the Pawnee, "Well, I'm sorry, we're not going to let you just, set up your teepees here on the grounds. You've got to live inside these trailers that we have here." They didn't make them do that. We respect your background, and we will do whatever we can to um, to embrace that. And I think that that's what made them so good with their cast, and their cast was incredibly loyal. I mean, you're not having the same people come back every year, but people wanted to do that with the Lilies.
Well, and you mentioned it in the early part of the interview about, the loss of their child, and it seems to me these were two people who, took the good with the bad. There were business betrayals,
Mm.
obviously deep personal loss. How do you think that those moments shaped who they would later become, but also, their relationship with each other?
Well, when it came to May, I think it solidified a sincere toughness in her, a sincere resolve that I am going to make the most out of my life that I possibly can, and I am going to be a good wife to my husband because he's a good husband to me, and we're going to do much more than just to be a part of this show. We are his love for being able to preserve the buffalo was something that she adopted as well. So it's amazing how much in common they had. And his passions became her passions. And fueled Gordon to want to do better with the shows as well. I'm sorry, Tyler, you ask a question, then I get so far
I
off
love it.
and
Yeah.
and these amazing people that I forget what you
Well,
even asked.
Well, yeah, I think you answered it well. My question was just about how those really shaped who they were and their marriage to each other, obviously. And what I found so striking in their story, and I'm sure you did as well, was they spend, I think, what, 20 plus years traveling and putting on shows. And then there's this very stark pivot when Gordon decides to combine with Buffalo Bill, where May kind of steps out of the public eye and really focuses on restoring the bison herd. Can you talk about that moment and what went into the decisions that they made?
Well, I think I touched on it at the very beginning too. She did not have any great trust for Cody. Cody had abused many of his business partners in the past. I mean, he would go into debt and then he would sell out a portion of his show to someone else, not tell his other partners. And so he wasn't a good businessman. And also, she thought he was quite the he wasn't faithful to his wife. He thought monogamy was a type of wood, and she was very offended. May was offended by this, and didn't believe that somebody with that lack of integrity was someone that you should go into business with. Not only that, but the Lillie show was doing so well. She saw no reason in 1908 when Gordon comes to her and says, I want to go into business with Cody. He's come to me with this proposition. She saw no need for that. She perceived this to be something that it was not going to be good for them, for their show, for their family. She just didn't think that it was going to be good. And so she said, I'm not going to stop you from doing this, but I can't be a part of it. And I thought, boy, that took guts. That took a lot of guts to be able to say, I love you. You can do whatever you want to do. I'm just telling you right now, he's not to be trusted. And doggone it if she wasn't absolutely accurate in what she said. But we got to go back to Gordon's original motivation for all this. He idolized Cody. He read the dime novels. He was a part of Cody's show at a very young age and would have done anything for Cody. So it was that affection and that loyalty to Cody that drew him into this partnership, which did ultimately not turn out to be a very good thing for them. But I don't think if Gordon had to do it over again, he would have done it any differently.
Yeah. Yeah. That childhood dream of being
Right,
Buffalo Bill was too hard to pass up.
right, absolutely so. And then they travel, they tour around, and they're quite successful a little while with the Two Bill show. And May was such a good soul. She never said, "Told you so." She was happy back at the ranch, working on the herd and growing the bison and making sure that people were aware that we've got to preserve the bison. If we don't pay attention to this, they're going to be lost to us.
It was
So,
it was so interesting to me that she pivoted to that purpose because I didn't realize how early that preservation had begun. in that part of the century, because we're still dealing with it and other parts of that preservation. Why for her was that something that she became passionate about?
I think she became more knowledgeable of the buffalo when she and Gordon began their venture into the Wild West show, and he shared with her when he was with the Pawnee how important the buffalo was, and how so many buffalo hunters were coming in, especially to the Kansas area, and just wholesale killing them. Cody, of course, one of the people that he admired, was one of those people who did that, was just killing a lot of the buffalo off. And they did it to the point of almost extinction. And he shared with her how important this was to the Pawnee Nation, the buffalo was to the Pawnee, not just the Pawnee, but to the Indians as a whole. And and she recognized how important that was too. I mean, I don't want to say that she was just going along with what her husband said, because she had a mind of her own, but she could recognize if you didn't do something, if you didn't step in, the bison was going to be no more. And so she had a heart for that, and was actually known as the Queen of the Buffalo, which I thought was quite of interesting. She goes from being princess of the sharpshooters to being the queen of the buffalo for a little while.
Wow. And I thought it was interesting too that that's not the end of the story, as far as them being kind of this, hub of culture of the West, because, their own ranch becomes kind of that. They build a replica frontier town, and, she becomes a pretty active community leader as well, as you mentioned. And, what role did their ranch and her involvement in the community help to keep their legacy alive?
Well, they did so much for the community. First of all, May struggled with her own health issues, and so while Gordon is gone with Cody, performing in the Two Bill show, she decides that she's going to build a sanatorium,
Yeah.
because she wanted her health restored, and wanted to be able to help restore the health of the other people in the community who weren't necessarily feeling well. And so she does that for the community. She's just they have them out to the ranch and give them tours of the ranch and educate them in terms of how important the buffalo is. I mean, they were both determined to let the public know how crucial information about the buffalo truly was, and that we have to know all about this animal, and not just look at it as something that we want to get rid of, and isn't their coat really great, and here's what we can make of it. I mean, she was very much on the forefront of bringing people out there to the ranch to be able to say, here's why this ranch is here, here's why this is important, here's why we need to continue to do Wild West shows here, because it is now 1910, and in 1910 you had silent films coming into play. And they, even though this is the other thing that the Lillies were on the forefront of, they were one of the very first ones to do silent films. And they did silent films about the Buffalo Ranch, about the buffalo, about the Wild West. But they realized with this new with motion pictures, with this on the horizon, that they saw that Wild West shows may not be as important. They're being passed away, much like, television overrun radio, or motion pictures overrun. She recognized the need for this, and so being able to have the frontier town, being able to have the ranch, getting everybody that they could to come there to be able to see how great this is. And we've got to embrace this, because if we don't embrace this, this is going to go like the buffalo was almost gone. So we need to look at this.
Yeah. Well, and what strikes me about May Lillie is that she's so quick to recognize these needs, whether it be, the Buffalo or the picture silent films or what have you. And, you've written about a lot of women in the West. And what about her sticks out among those women? And what about her fits into that broader tradition that you've seen?
I think her perseverance, for me, being able to recognize, I lost my son. I'm not going to stay here in this fit of depression. And this was at a time period where you couldn't go down and get anybody to say, all right, well, here's what we can do.
Right.
Here's some medication for you to feel better.
Right.
She had that stamina, that ability within herself to say, here's what we're going to do. And I think that makes her prepared, that helps her to be prepared for tragedies to come, because there were tragedies that came.
Right.
And I think that she was one of those women that women admired. They didn't feel threatened by her. And I think that that's important because a lot of times today, I mean, people talk about women power, and I don't necessarily see it so much, but I see it in somebody like May, who wasn't trying to make anybody feel bad for whatever it is that they wanted to do as a woman. If you wanted to be a housewife, she was very happy to support that. If you wanted to be a part of the Wild West show, she was happy to support that too. And so I think that made her a woman to be admired by other women. Um, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and her and Gordon both, from conservationists to show people, community leaders, you know, and then you realize that wow, they've just been so overlooked, in a lot of the history of the Old West, and you know, why should they be remembered? What about their story can resonate with people today?
I think for me, it was how smart they were business wise, except for that little lull in Gordon's life, which didn't last too long. It was maybe a 2, 3 year period where he did business with Cody. But I think for the most part, they were smart. They could look ahead and they could say, here's where things are going. All right, the Wild West show is good. We'll continue doing this. But look, we have silent films on the horizon, and we're going to get in early on this. And so they start their own production company and start doing silent films at the ranch. So I think it's their ability to adapt. They weren't a couple who said, "Well, that was then, and we're a part of that Old West show, and there's nothing more that we can do with getting the message out." They adapted. They saw how things were progressing, and they adapted to that, and I appreciated that about them, and I think that's what makes them people to be admired, a couple to be admired, and what they did for Pawnee, for the northeast Oklahoma, or for Oklahoma as a whole, but certainly for that particular part of it. I mean, they're still revered there. People still come to the Pawnee Ranch and see this amazing ranch that was built with all these rooms, and the first ranch to be built with electricity in the area. I mean, they were always on the forefront of being able to look ahead and say, here's what we can do, and here's what we're going to do.
Right, exactly.
And have people at their place that were not just the old people with their show, but I mean, they had Will Rogers spent time with them. Um, later on in life, Gordon is very good friends with Gary Cooper, with John Wayne. I mean, they are such an admirable couple that the first Hollywood stars seek them out
Wow.
to want to know more about them and know about more about their shows and their lives.
Wow. Wow. Well, for my last question, where can readers find your book? And what's next for you in terms of maybe your next foray into the Wild West?
Well, you can find my book on in any place that books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Amazon.com. Um, you can certainly go to my website and you can order the book through my website, which is chrisenss.com. Um, and the next book that I am working on a couple right now. I did a documentary with Kevin Costner's production company this past year called The West, and I was talking about women evangelists of the American frontier. And so one of my next books is called West Went the Word, and it's about those women evangelists who went beyond the Mississippi to tell people about the Lord, and how sometimes that worked out well and sometimes it did not. And then I'm also working on a book called The Last Ride, the story of the outlaw Laura Bullion and the Wild Bunch. Laura Bullion robbed the last train helped rob the last train with the Wild Bunch before that was no more, that they did nothing else beyond that. So,
Oh, well, we'll be eagerly anticipating those releases as well. And Chris, thank you so much for your time. We only just touched on, the story of the Lillies, and if folks want to hear the full story, they should pick up your book.
oh, please do. I hope so. It's called The Sharpshooter and the Showman. It's a good read.
Thank you, Chris, for your time. We really appreciate it, and we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care.